Today, we're going to be going over 3 moves that DBs cannot stop and cannot guard. So this first move we're going to be discussing is something called a throw-by move. So this is a throw-by move that you guys can use on a hitch, on a curl, on a dig. Generally, anytime you take an outside release and you have a DB who is an inside shade press and you have to run a route where you have to drop your hips. I mean, honestly, you could use it on routes where you're even cutting off of 1 foot. That's why this throw-by move is great, because it really applies to any situation. So this wide receiver is running just like a simple 5-yard hitch, putting the brakes on at 5, coming back to the ball. So we have a DB who's inside shade press, so obviously we're not going to take this inside release and then run my hitch. We're giving, maybe a quick move to the inside. This receiver kind of slides to the outside, which is totally fine. Our goal is just to hold him to the inside and then push up vertical. Now, all the way to this like 5-yard break right here where he's pushing up, we want to make this DB think we're running what? A fade. I want to make it look exactly like how I would run my deep ball. So we have to have this slight forward lean with my pad level. We have to make sure that I'm running with the same strides going into the break. It doesn't need to be overly long strides. Just from the start of the route to the end of the route, the strides have to be the same. And then my speed, same thing. Off the ball to the end of the route, my speed has to be the exact same. If you could do those 3 things, that's when this throw-by move actually works. The throw-by is only going to work if we get this DB to do something called open up the gate, which is where his hips and his shoulders turn essentially to the opposite end zone. So now when I get to the break point, guys, at the last possible second, we want to put my hand. It's got to be 3 points of contact, either the back of the arm, if you're a little bit further away like this wide receiver, the back of the hip, or the back of the shoulder. Those are your 3 points of contact. And as soon as you decide to put the brakes on, that is when your hand should go up. Now, the mistake a lot of receivers will make on this throw-by move is that they'll be pushing vertical, but they don't do it at the last possible second. Let's say the brake's at like 6 yards, for example. At 3 yards, they'll start to put their hand out and they try to like feel for that DB to set up the throw-by. That's going to make this DB slow down because he's expecting you to put the brakes on when doing that. So it needs to be the last possible second, and those are the 3 points of control. So like I said, you guys, anytime that we get a DB in this position where his hips are open, we could do a hitch, we could run a dig, we could run a post, we could run a curl, anything where you have to break towards like where the DB is playing, that's when this throw-by could apply. So like let's say we have to run a 5-yard out and the DB was like outside shade press. You would do this, but you'd attack his inside hip and inside shoulder and then ultimately work your moves. This is a great textbook move at the top of the route. Now we're going to get into some press release stuff. And this specific press release here from Jamar Chase that he honestly uses literally on every single route. And this is why it is unguardable, because it is extremely tough for DBs to be able to anticipate this move and react off of this move. But before we get into that, fellas, if you are a wide receiver and you would like to train with myself and my staff of coaches this offseason, or if you're a quarterback, we are going to be traveling out to 15 different cities across the country for 2-day-long QB and wide receiver training camp. So guys, check out that very first link in the description below if you would like to sign up. We're going to be coming out to San Francisco. That camp is completely sold out. Then we'll be coming out to Orlando, Florida. That camp has like literally 3 spots left, you guys. Then Phoenix, then Charlotte, then Austin. All 3 of those camps, guys, 2 have like about 5 spots remaining. Then we'll be heading out to Vegas, Seattle, Chicago, Newark, Birmingham, Houston, Boston, Columbus, Boise, and Los Angeles. So guys, want some more information, want to sign up, again, check out that very first link in the description below. We'd love to have you out to one of our off-season 2-day-long camps across the U.S. Let's get back to this video. So let's talk about this release here from Jamar Chase. So this is honestly a release he uses on every single route. And then this is honestly a release that Devontae Adams uses all the time. Justin Jefferson uses all the time, because it's a great way to kind of set up this DB and us to be able to like react off of him, if that makes sense. So this is going to be called our hesitation skip release. So the skip happens on your front foot, but it's built off of a kick step move, and we're going to discuss that in a second. So what you are doing to start this release is you take your back foot and you kick it behind your front foot. You don't just skip into this release. You use your back foot, you kick behind to kind of load up your hips and to generate some momentum. And essentially what you were doing is you were just going to take a hop step on your right foot. It's very similar to like a hezi, and I guess you could say like basketball, right? So he kicks behind, does the skip. Now, on this skip, what we are doing right now is we are gathering info on this DB. How is he going to play it? So Jamar Chase is running a fade route, but there are a lot of examples of Jamar Chase putting the brakes on and taking an inside release on a fade route. Now, I understand that sometimes you guys have something called an MOR, which means mandatory outside release. This is not that situation for this fade route. I wouldn't recommend using this release for that situation on a fade route. I recommend something quicker like a jab move inside, but honestly, any route other than a mandatory outside release fade, this can work. Because on this skip, like I said, we are reading the DB. If this DB sits inside shade when I do my skip, I just take off and go to the outside. When I do my skip, because I am attacking vertical, this DB could do one of two things. He's either going to sit inside or he's going to jump to the outside. And if he jumps to the outside, I could just put the brakes on and then take what he gives me to the inside release. So this DB's kind of damned if he does, damned if he doesn't. If he jumps to the outside, great, we take the inside release. If he sits to the inside, bam, we beat him with speed to the outside. And you see how he's able to just beat him by a step and just get a little bit of separation. That's all we need, especially when we have a quarterback who could put the ball on a dime. So that's a great release, fellas, that you guys can use. Very, very tough for DBs to guard this because it's just hard to predict. You have to put yourself in a DB's shoes. He is looking for little intricacies of our release, of our route, that gives him tells. He's trying to read us, right? Again, that's the whole purpose of man-to-man coverage. His eyes are on my hips. He's trying to read my hips, trying to read my body language. But if we don't give him that, if we could do multiple moves off of this single skip or multiple moves off of a specific release, it's insanely tough for a DB to make a play on us, okay? All right, so now next release we're going to be talking about here is from Julian Edelman. So this is going to be something called a wide step release, and I'm sure all of you have either, tried to do this, have done this successfully, but maybe not with this type of, I guess you could say, like coaching point involved. And so it's going to be a wide step release. It's pretty much impossible to guard if you know how to sell the release with your hips and with your upper half, not just your head and your shoulders. So let's play at full speed, then we'll break it down. So he's got a DB who's in outside shade press. And he's running like a quick 5-yard out. Very, very tough to do this. But what he's doing is he's going to throw a hard jab step to the inside, forcing this DB to have to completely break his leverage responsibility. Because remember, his leverage responsibility being outside shade is to not let anybody go to the outside. So we were trying to get him to completely break his leverage responsibility. And the only way I do that is by selling a release with your hips. So I'm going to play this full speed, then we'll break it down. So it is wide step release, DB jumps, outside release, and is able to win on this 5-yard out. So let's talk about it. So you see what he does with his back foot? That's very similar to that Jamar Chase kick step that we were talking about. He kicks behind his he kicks behind his front foot with his back leg. That loads up his hips. That creates some explosion. So now when he goes to throw this jab, because he loaded up his hips with that kick step, his hip is essentially like attached to his foot. That's how I want you guys to think of it. Wherever your foot goes, your hip follows. And also, that's where your head goes. I call it trying to get stacked. I say this a lot with quarterbacks as well when I'm talking about their throwing base. But getting stacked, you're not going to be in a perfect stacked position where your knee is right on top of your foot and your head is right on top of your knee. But that's essentially what I mean. Head, knee, foot on top of each other. Or I should say this, excuse me, head, hip, foot are right on top of each other. But if you could get in that mindset that when you throw these types of wide step cuts, your hip is going with the foot, look at how much his body turns. That's what breaks a DB's leverage. Now imagine if this DB was just in head up press, how far he would jump if we were able to do that. So guys, a wide step release, a jab step release is damn near unguardable. Impossible to stop if you could sell with your hips, because that DB eventually has to make a choice. And if you step that far and you sell it that well with your hips, the choice he's going to make is to break that leverage or to run with that, because it looks too much like you're just running a drag or a quick slant.